A very long time ago, in a country called England, lived a brilliant writer. His name was William Shakespeare, and he is famous all over the world for the amazing plays he wrote. He lived more than 400 years ago, but we still read his stories and watch his plays today. Shakespeare was a true master of words. He could write stories that were funny, sad, exciting, and full of adventure. He understood people very well, what makes them happy, what makes them angry, and what makes them fall in love. He wrote about kings and queens, fairies and ghosts, and ordinary people with big dreams and even bigger problems, making his tales feel real. One of his most famous plays is called Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare wrote this incredible story around the year 1597. That is a very, very long time ago. But the story feels like it could happen even today. It is a tale of two young people who fall deeply in love, but their love story is not an easy one. It is set in a beautiful city in Italy called Verona. Shakespeare might have heard an old Italian story that was similar, and he used his fantastic imagination to turn it into the powerful play that has captured the hearts of people for centuries, a true masterpiece of storytelling. The story of Romeo and Juliet is known as a tragedy. A tragedy is a type of story that starts off with some hope and happiness, but ends very sadly. Shakespeare was very good at writing tragedies. He showed how small mistakes or bad luck can lead to very big problems, creating a chain of events that nobody can seem to stop. In this play, he explores powerful feelings like love and hate, and asks big questions about life. He makes us wonder if our lives are controlled by our own choices, or if something else like fate or destiny is guiding us along a path we cannot change. Even though the language Shakespeare used is a bit different from how we speak today, the story itself is very easy to understand. It is about powerful emotions that everyone, no matter where they are from or when they lived, can feel. It is about the joy of finding your first love and the deep sadness of losing someone you care about. That is why, hundreds of years after he first put his pen to paper, we are still talking about William Shakespeare and the wonderful, heartbreaking story of Romeo and Juliet. His work reminds us that some stories are timeless, and some feelings are universal to all of us. In the city of Verona, where our story takes place, we meet two very important families. First, there are the Montagues. The head of this family is Lord Montague, and his wife is Lady Montague. Their son is a young man named Romeo. Romeo is a dreamer. He is very romantic and feels emotions very deeply. When he is happy, he is full of joy. But when he is sad, he is truly heartbroken. Romeo is a good friend to his cousins, Benvolio, who is a peaceful person and always tries to stop fights, and Mercutio, who is a relative of the prince and is very funny and full of life. Mercutio loves to make jokes and tell exciting stories. On the other side, we have the Capulet family. Lord and Lady Capulet are the heads of this household. They have a beautiful daughter named Juliet, who is almost 14 years old. At the beginning of the story, Juliet is a sweet and obedient girl who always listens to her parents. But as the story goes on, she shows that she is also very strong and brave. Juliet has a cousin named Tybalt. Unlike the peaceful Benvolio, Tybalt has a very quick temper. He is proud and gets angry very easily, especially when he feels his family's honor has been insulted. He is known for being a very skilled fighter. Helping Juliet is her nurse. The nurse has taken care of Juliet since she was a baby, and loves her like her own daughter. She is very talkative and often tells funny and sometimes inappropriate stories. She is Juliet's closest friend and confidant, the person Juliet trusts with all her secrets. Another important person is Friar Lawrence. He is a kind and wise holy man who lives just outside the city. He is like a father figure to Romeo. The friar knows a lot about plants and herbs, and he hopes that he can one day bring peace to the feuding families of Verona. Finally, there is the ruler of the city, Prince Aeschylus. The prince is very tired of all the fighting between the Montagues and the Capulets. He is a powerful man who wants peace and order in his city. He has warned both families that if they are caught fighting in the streets again, they will face a very serious punishment. There is also a young nobleman named Paris. He is a relative of the prince, and he has asked Lord Capulet for permission to marry Juliet. Lord Capulet thinks Paris is a very good match for his daughter, a perfect husband for a girl from a noble family. These are the people whose lives will cross in our sad and beautiful story. The beautiful city of Verona is home to a very ugly problem. The two most powerful families, the Montagues and the Capulets, are enemies. This isn't a small disagreement, it's a deep and ancient hatred that has been passed down through generations. The play begins by telling us about this ancient grudge, but Shakespeare never tells us exactly why it started. The reason for the feud is lost to time, which shows how senseless it has become. The families no longer remember why they are fighting, they just know that they are supposed to hate each other. This shows how hate can live on long after its cause is forgotten. This long-standing hatred spills out onto the streets of Verona, causing chaos and violence for everyone. The servants of the two houses will insult each other, which quickly turns into arguments, and then into sword fights. In the very first scene of the play, a fight breaks out between the servants, and soon involves the noblemen, including the hot-headed Tybalt and the peace-loving Benvolio. The fight grows so large that it disrupts the entire city, drawing ordinary citizens into the brawl. The feud is like a disease that has infected Verona, making its streets unsafe and turning neighbors into bitter enemies. The leaders of the families, Lord Capulet and Lord Montague, are just as much to blame. Even though they are older, they are quick to join the fighting themselves, encouraging the hatred instead of trying to stop it. Prince Aeschylus, the ruler of Verona, is completely fed up with their behavior. He arrives to stop the street brawl and declares that the families have disturbed the peace of his city 3 times already. He issues a very serious warning: if anyone from either family is caught fighting in public again, the person responsible will be punished by death. This new law raises the stakes and adds a layer of danger to the story. This constant conflict creates a world filled with tension and danger for everyone, but especially for the young people like Romeo and Juliet. They have grown up being taught to hate the other family without question. The feud is a dark cloud that hangs over their lives, controlling who they can be friends with and, most importantly, who they are allowed to love. It is this wall of hatred, built by their ancestors, that will become the biggest obstacle to their happiness. The family feud is not just a background detail, it is the central force of conflict that drives the entire tragedy forward. At the beginning of our story, Romeo is feeling very sad and heartbroken. He is in love with a girl named Rosalind, but she does not love him back. He spends his days walking alone, avoiding his friends and family, and sighing under sycamore trees. His cousin Benvolio tries to cheer him up. He tells Romeo that the best way to forget Rosalind is to look at other beautiful girls in Verona. Romeo thinks this is impossible and believes that no one could ever be as beautiful as Rosalind. He is completely lost in his own sadness, unaware that his life is about to change in a very big way. Meanwhile, Lord Capulet is planning a big party at his house. He wants to introduce his daughter Juliet to the handsome Count Paris, who he hopes she will marry. Lord Capulet gives a guest list to one of his servants and tells him to go and invite everyone on it. There's just one problem: the servant cannot read. He wanders through the streets of Verona, worrying about how he will complete his task. By chance he bumps into Romeo and Benvolio. The servant asks Romeo if he can help him by reading the names on the list. Romeo kindly agrees to help him out. As Romeo reads the list of names, he sees that one of the invited guests is Rosalind, the very girl who has been making him so miserable. Benvolio sees this as a perfect opportunity. He convinces Romeo that they should crash the party. He tells Romeo that if he sees Rosalind standing next to all the other beautiful ladies of Verona, he will realize that she is not so special after all. Romeo is not so sure, but he agrees to go to the party, not to find someone new but just to see his beloved Rosalind one more time. Because they are Montagues, they must wear masks to hide their identities, or they will be in great danger. That night at the Capulets' grand feast, Romeo moves through the crowd, still looking for Rosalind, but then he sees a girl dancing and he is instantly captivated. He has never seen anyone so beautiful in his entire life. He completely forgets about Rosalind. He asks a servant who she is, but the servant doesn't know. Romeo feels he must meet her. He walks up to the girl, who is of course Juliet, and takes her hand. He speaks to her with beautiful, poetic words, and she is just as charmed by him. In that single moment, hidden behind their masks, they fall in love, not knowing that they come from enemy families. After the party is over, Romeo just can't bear to leave the Capulet house. He feels drawn to Juliet, almost like there's a magnetic force pulling him back. So instead of heading home with his friends, he climbs over the high orchard wall and hides in the garden below Juliet's balcony, hoping he might, catch another glimpse of the girl who's completely stolen his heart. As he waits there in the shadows, he suddenly sees a light appear in a window above. Juliet steps out onto her balcony, and Romeo is absolutely mesmerized by her beauty. He even compares her to the sun, saying she's so bright that she makes the moon look pale with envy. Hidden from her sight, he listens quietly. Juliet, thinking she's all alone, starts to speak her thoughts out loud into the night air. She talks about the wonderful young man she met at the party, but then she gets sad when she remembers his name is Romeo, and that he's a Montague, her family's greatest enemy. She asks that famous question, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" Which in other words means, why do you have to be Romeo, a Montague? She says that a name is just a word, and it doesn't really change who a person is. She wishes he could just get rid of his name so they could be together, and even says she'd happily give up her own name to be with him. Hearing all this, Romeo can't stay hidden any longer. He steps out from the shadows and speaks to her. Juliet is startled and, well, at first a little scared, but she quickly recognizes his voice. She's worried that if any of her family members find him in the garden, they'll kill him on the spot. But Romeo isn't afraid at all. He says he'd rather face their hatred than live without her love, and tells her that love gave him wings to fly over those high garden walls. They talk under the moonlight, sharing their deep feelings for one another and declaring their love in some of the most beautiful language ever written. Their conversation is just filled with passion and urgency. Even though they've only just met, it feels as if they've known each other forever. Juliet, though, is a bit more practical than Romeo. She worries that their love is too sudden, too much like lightning that flashes and disappears before you can even say its name. But honestly, their connection is just too strong to ignore. Before they part, they make a promise. They decide to get married in secret. Juliet tells Romeo that she'll send a messenger to him the next day to find out the time and place for their secret wedding. The secret plan, well, it sets their tragic story in motion. The very next morning, filled with joy and excitement, Romeo rushes to see his friend Friar Lawrence. The friar is in his garden gathering herbs and flowers. He is a wise man who understands the power of nature, knowing that a single plant can have the power to heal or to poison depending on how it is used. Romeo tells the friar that he has completely forgotten about Rosalind and is now deeply in love with Juliet, a Capulet. He asks the friar if he will marry them in secret that very day. The friar is shocked by how quickly Romeo has changed his mind, from being in love with one girl to another. At first, Friar Lawrence is hesitant. He scolds Romeo for being so fickle, for falling in and out of love so easily. He tells Romeo that young men's love seems to be in their eyes, not in their hearts. However, the friar thinks about the bigger picture. He sees a chance for something good to come from this sudden romance. He knows about the terrible feud between the Montagues and the Capulets, a conflict that has brought so much pain to Verona. He thinks that maybe, just maybe, the marriage of Romeo and Juliet could be the one thing that finally ends the fighting and turns the family's hatred into love. With this hopeful thought in his mind, the friar agrees to help the young lovers. He warns Romeo to be careful and not to rush things, saying, wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast. Meanwhile, Juliet is anxiously waiting at home for news from Romeo. She sent her trusted nurse to find him at 9 o'clock, but it is now past noon, and the nurse has not returned. When the nurse finally arrives, she teases Juliet by complaining about her aching bones and being out of breath, delaying the good news. This makes Juliet even more anxious, showing the playful and loving relationship they share. Eventually, the nurse tells Juliet the plan. She must pretend she is going to confession at Friar Lawrence's cell that afternoon. There, Romeo will be waiting for her, and the friar will secretly marry them. The nurse also says she will get a rope ladder so that Romeo can climb up to Juliet's balcony that night for their wedding night. Overjoyed, Juliet hurries to the friar's cell. There, in the quiet solitude of the church, with only the friar as their witness, Romeo and Juliet are married. They are now husband and wife, bound together by a love they believe can conquer anything, even their family's hate. Just a few hours after Romeo and Juliet are secretly married, the happy mood of the story changes very quickly. The day is hot, and the tempers of the people in Verona are even hotter. Benvolio, who can sense trouble brewing, tries to convince his friend Mercutio to go home and avoid the Capulets. But Mercutio is in a playful, fiery mood and refuses to back down. Soon enough, Tybalt, Juliet's hot-headed cousin, appears on the street. He is still furious that Romeo, a Montague, dared to show up at the Capulet party the night before. He is looking for Romeo to challenge him to a duel. When Romeo arrives, he is happy and full of love from his recent marriage. He has no desire to fight. When Tybalt insults him, calling him a villain, Romeo refuses to get angry. He tells Tybalt that he has a reason to love him, a reason Tybalt cannot possibly understand. Of course, Romeo is referring to the fact that he is now married to Juliet, which makes Tybalt his cousin by marriage. But no one else knows this secret. Mercutio is disgusted by what he sees as Romeo's cowardly behavior. He cannot believe that his friend would refuse to defend his honor against a Capulet. Furious at Romeo's calm refusal to fight, Mercutio draws his own sword and challenges Tybalt himself. Romeo, desperate to keep the peace and protect his new relative and his best friend, steps between them to try and stop the fight. But as he does, Tybalt lunges with his sword under Romeo's arm and stabs Mercutio. Mortally wounded, Mercutio curses both the Montague and Capulet families, crying out, "A plague of both your houses!" He is then helped away by his friends and dies off stage. The curse shows that the feud is now affecting people outside of the two families. Blinded by grief and rage over his friend's death, Romeo completely forgets his promise to be peaceful. He forgets about his love for Juliet and the consequences of fighting. All he can think about is revenge. He finds Tybalt, challenges him, and in a furious sword fight, Romeo kills Juliet's cousin. As soon as Tybalt falls, Romeo realizes the terrible mistake he has made. He cries out, "Oh, I am fortune's fool," meaning he feels like a puppet of fate. He has broken the prince's law and now must flee. This single act of violence unravels everything, turning a story of love into a true tragedy. The news of the fight spreads quickly through Verona. Prince Aeschylus arrives, and instead of sentencing Romeo to death as he had promised, he shows a little mercy. Because Tybalt killed Mercutio first, the prince banishes Romeo from Verona. He must leave the city immediately and never return, or he will be killed. When Juliet hears the news, she is heartbroken. Her cousin is dead, and her new husband is banished. After spending one secret wedding night together, Romeo must leave for the nearby city of Mantua. They say a tearful goodbye at dawn, not knowing it will be the last time they see each other alive. Things get even worse for poor Juliet. To cheer her up from what he thinks is sadness over Tybalt's death, her father, Lord Capulet, makes a sudden decision. He arranges for her to marry Count Paris in just a few days. When Juliet refuses, her father becomes incredibly angry. He threatens to disown her and throw her out onto the streets if she does not obey him. Feeling trapped and desperate, with no one to turn to, Juliet goes to Friar Lawrence for help. The friar comes up with a very risky plan to reunite her with Romeo and avoid the second marriage. The friar gives Juliet a special potion. He explains that if she drinks it, it will make her fall into a deep sleep that looks exactly like death. She will have no pulse, no breath, and her skin will be cold. Her family will think she is dead and will place her in the Capulet family tomb. The friar promises to send a letter to Romeo in Mantua explaining the whole plan. Romeo will then come back to Verona, be there when Juliet wakes up in the tomb, and they can run away together to live happily ever after. Trusting the friar, Juliet agrees to the dangerous plan, but fate has a cruel twist in store. The friar's messenger is delayed by a quarantine and never reaches Romeo with the letter. Instead, Romeo's servant, who saw Juliet being buried, rushes to Mantua with the tragic and incorrect news that Juliet is truly dead. Heartbroken and in despair, Romeo buys a fast-acting poison from an apothecary and rides back to Verona to die beside his beloved wife. At the tomb, he finds a grieving Paris, fights and kills him, and then sees Juliet's seemingly lifeless body. He gives her one last kiss, drinks the poison, and dies. Moments later, Juliet wakes up, finds Romeo dead beside her, and seeing no other way out, uses his dagger to take her own life. The story of Romeo and Juliet ends in ultimate sadness. Friar Lawrence arrives at the tomb too late and finds the tragic scene. The families and the prince are called, and the friar explains the entire secret story of their children's love, their secret marriage, and the series of unfortunate events that led to their deaths. Seeing their children lying dead, Lord Capulet and Lord Montague finally realize the terrible price of their foolish and long-standing hatred. They are overwhelmed with grief and shame. In a moment of shared sorrow, they agree to end their feud and promise to build golden statues in honor of each other's child. So, why has this sad story remained so famous for over 400 years? One of the biggest reasons is its powerful exploration of love. The love between Romeo and Juliet is passionate, intense, and all-consuming. It is a perfect picture of first love, with all its excitement and urgency. Their love is so strong that they are willing to defy their families, their society, and even death itself to be together. This theme of love against all odds is something that people of all ages and from all cultures can understand and connect with, making the story feel personal and deeply moving for every new generation that discovers it. The play also serves as a powerful warning about the destructive nature of hatred and conflict. The ancient grudge between the Montagues and the Capulets leads to nothing but violence, chaos, and ultimately, the deaths of their own children. Shakespeare shows us that hate, when left unchecked, can poison everything and everyone it touches. The story forces us to think about the senseless conflicts in our own world and reminds us of the importance of forgiveness, understanding, and peace. It's a timeless lesson that is just as relevant today as it was in Shakespeare's time, urging us to look past our differences. Finally, Romeo and Juliet endures because it speaks to universal human experiences. It deals with big ideas like fate versus free will, the pressure from family, and the rash decisions we make when we are young. The story is a perfect blend of love, action, poetry, and tragedy, making it endlessly fascinating. It has been retold in countless movies, musicals like West Side Story, ballets, and books. Each new version shows that the tale of two young lovers from Verona, caught between love and hate, is a story that belongs to everyone. It is a timeless masterpiece that will continue to break our hearts and teach us about love for centuries to come.